He slid the papers across the marble dining table like they were nothing, like 8 years meant nothing. Sign them, Hyun said, already turning back to his phone. Or don't. Either way, I'm done pretending this marriage is something it's not. Amara Brooks stared at the document. The words blurred. Open marriage agreement. Her hands were steady. She'd learned to keep them steady around him, but her chest felt like something had caved in behind her ribs. You want an open marriage, she said. Not a question, a confirmation of the worst thing she'd ever heard. I want what I've already had, he said flatly. I just want it to be legal now. She looked up at him. 8 years. 8 years of following him to Seoul, learning the language, bending her life into the shape of his ambitions. 8 years of fertility treatments and silent dinners, and smiling at his colleagues' wives while he took calls in the next room. 8 years, and he was talking about it like a billing dispute. And the woman you've been seeing? Amara asked. Hyun set his phone down. For the first time all evening, he actually looked at her. She's been living in the Mapo apartment for 3 months. I thought you knew. She didn't know. She hadn't known. But now she did. If you've ever sat across from someone who once promised you everything and watched their face while they told you it meant nothing, hit that like button. And drop your city in the comments. I want to know how far this story travels. Subscribe so you don't miss what happens next, because what Amara does in the next 24 hours will change everything. Let's begin. The dining room in their Hanam-dong apartment was the kind of room that made guests exhale when they walked in. Floor-to-ceiling windows, a view of the Han River that cost more per square meter than most people earned in a year. Hyun Park had chosen it specifically for the view, for what it communicated to anyone who stood inside it. Look how far I've come. Look what I've built. Amara had spent 8 years standing at that window, telling herself the view was enough. She picked up the papers. She didn't read them. She couldn't, not with the ringing in her ears. But she held them. They were heavier than they looked, or maybe her arms had just gotten tired. Jisoo, she said. Hyun didn't flinch. He'd already picked his phone back up. Her name doesn't matter. It does to me. Amara set the papers back down, carefully. She was aware, in the distant way you become aware of things when your body goes into a kind of protective shock, that she was being very careful not to throw them. How long? Amara, how long, Hyun? He exhaled, the kind of exhale that carries contempt dressed up as patience. 2 years. 2 years. She did the math without meaning to. 2 years ago, she'd had the 3rd miscarriage. 2 years ago, she'd spent 4 days in a hospital bed while Hyun took meetings in Tokyo and sent flowers through his assistant. 2 years ago, she'd believed him when he said he was grieving too, that they were grieving together. She stood up from the table. Her legs worked. That surprised her. Where are you going? He asked. I need a minute. The papers aren't going anywhere. She walked to the bedroom. She sat on the edge of the bed, their bed, with the Belgian linen she'd special ordered and the reading lamp she'd picked out at a market in Insadong before everything went cold between them. And she put her face in her hands and she breathed. In, out, in, out. She didn't cry. She wanted to, but the tears wouldn't come. There was something lodged in her throat that was bigger than crying. She didn't have a name for it yet. She thought about calling her sister Denise in Atlanta. Then she remembered it was 3 a.m. there. She thought about calling her friend Yuna, but Yuna was Hyun's colleague's wife, and that meant the story would travel before Amara even hung up the phone. She had nobody to call. That understanding arrived quietly, but it hit harder than anything Hyun had said at the table. In 8 years in Seoul, she had built a life that belonged entirely to him. His city, his language, his circle, his apartment. She had poured herself into the shape of his world so completely that when you removed him from the equation, there was nothing left with her name on it, nothing except her work, her laptop, the freelance clients she'd been maintaining quietly on the side because some part of her, some small, stubborn part, had refused to let go entirely. She went back to the dining room. Hyun looked up from his phone with an expression that was almost surprised, like he'd expected her to stay in the bedroom until morning and make this easier for him. I'm not signing anything tonight, she said. Amara, and I want you to explain to me what this is. She tapped the papers. An open marriage. That's what you want, not a divorce. He leaned back in his chair. When Hyun Park was calculating something, his face went very still. She'd learned to read that stillness. An open marriage gives us both flexibility. You keep the lifestyle, the apartment, the access. You want me to stay in this apartment while you go home to Jisoo in Mapo. It's more complicated than, is it, Hyun? Because from where I'm standing, it sounds very simple. Her voice didn't shake. She was distantly proud of that. You've had a girlfriend for 2 years. You want to make that official without the inconvenience of a divorce, and you need me to sign a piece of paper that makes me agree it's acceptable. He stood up. Hyun was taller than her by nearly a foot, and he'd always known how to use that. The fertility issue, don't, is documented. You know the situation. A family is, I said don't, a non-negotiable for the Park family. Hyun. Her voice cracked on his name. Not from grief, from fury. From the kind of fury that comes from being talked about like a malfunctioning appliance for the 3rd year in a row. The fertility issue. Our fertility issue. 3 miscarriages, Hyun. 3. And every single doctor told us the problem was bilateral, not mine alone. But you sat across from your mother and let her decide I was defective, and you never said a word. Silence. You let her think it was me, Amara said. Quieter now. For 3 years, you let her say those things to my face at family dinners, and you never said a word. Hyun's jaw tightened. That's not what this is about. That's exactly what this is about. She picked up the papers. For a moment, she considered it, actually considered signing them, because some exhausted part of her just wanted this negotiation to be over. Then she set them back down. I need somewhere to stay tonight. He frowned. You live here. I'm not sleeping in this apartment tonight. That's dramatic. Which hotel, she said, do you keep on corporate account? The Grand Intercontinental or the Shilla? He stared at her. Amara, stop. You don't have to. Which hotel, Hyun? The Intercontinental. He said it like he was angry at her for making him say it. She walked to the bedroom and pulled her overnight bag from the closet. She was very efficient about it. She packed the way you pack when you've been through enough crises to know that efficiency is the only thing standing between you and falling apart completely. Toiletries. 2 changes of clothes. Her laptop, her hard drive. Her passport, because some instinct she didn't understand made her grab it. When she came back through the living room, Hyun was still standing at the table. He looked, for the first time in longer than she could remember, uncertain. We can talk about this in the morning, he said. We can, she agreed. She picked up her bag. But I want you to know something before I go. He waited. You didn't break me tonight, she said. You actually broke me a long time ago, and I just didn't have the language for it. But now I do. She looked at him, really looked at him, one last time, with the full terrible clarity of someone who has finally stopped hoping. And I think we both know this marriage has been over for longer than either of us admitted. She walked out. The elevator ride to the lobby took 43 seconds. She counted. It gave her something to do with her brain while the rest of her tried to catch up to what had just happened. The night air hit her on the sidewalk. Seoul in late October was cold in that particular way that made the city feel awake, sharp and indifferent and enormous. She stood on the pavement outside their building with her overnight bag over her shoulder, and the Han River lit up behind the skyline like a long, dark mirror, and she breathed. Her phone buzzed. A message from Hyun. The room is booked. Room 1204. Try to get some sleep. She stared at it. Then she opened her banking app. Her personal account, the one she maintained from her freelance income, had enough for 3, maybe 4 weeks if she was careful. Her joint account with Hyun showed 0 pending deductions, which meant he hadn't yet started protecting his assets. That would change soon. She knew him well enough to know that. She got in a cab. Tis. The Grand Intercontinental Seoul was the kind of hotel that existed specifically to make you feel like your problems were smaller than the lobby. Amara had attended 3 corporate dinners here and 1 charity gala. She'd always arrived on Hyun's arm, in clothes he'd selected, smiling at people she didn't know for reasons that served his career. Tonight she arrived alone, with an overnight bag and the look of someone who had just had the floor pulled out from under them. The front desk attendant was too professional to notice, or too professional to let it show, which amounted to the same thing. Room 1204 was on a high floor with a view of the mountains. She stood at the window for a while, not looking at the view, looking through it. Somewhere on the other side of the city, Hyun Park was probably on the phone with Jisoo, explaining that it had gone fine, that Amara was difficult but manageable, that they'd have the signatures by the weekend. She sat on the edge of the bed. Then she stood up, because sitting still was worse. She took her laptop out of her bag and opened it, not because she had work to do, but because the blue light of the screen was something to focus on. She had 3 unread messages from freelance clients. She responded to all 3, efficiently, professionally, with zero indication that her life was actively on fire. She had learned this particular skill from years of performing normalcy at Hyun's business dinners, and tonight it was the only skill she had left. At some point around midnight, she was hungry. She hadn't eaten since lunch. The minibar held overpriced crackers and 2 tiny bottles of wine, and she ate the crackers standing at the window and told herself that tomorrow she would make a plan. Tomorrow she would think clearly. Tonight she was just going to get through the hours. She was on her second sleeve of crackers when she heard a low murmur of voices in the corridor outside her door. Not alarming. Hotel corridors were always full of sounds. But something about the cadence caught her attention. Deliberate. Low. The kind of conversation that wasn't meant to carry. She ignored it. Then there was a knock. She frowned. It was past midnight. Hyun didn't know her room number. She'd checked in herself after he made the booking, and the front desk had confirmed the room had been changed per her request. She'd done that quietly, on instinct. She didn't know why. She went to the door and checked the peephole. A woman in a hotel uniform stood in the hallway holding a tray. "Complimentary late service, Ms. Brooks." Amara hadn't ordered anything. She opened the door. The woman set the tray on the entry table and left without making eye contact, and Amara stood looking at the tray. Hot soup, a small plate of rice, a glass of water, and wondering who had sent it because she hadn't used her real name at the front desk. She'd checked in under her maiden name. Brooks, not Park. Under the soup bowl was a small card, printed, not handwritten. 3 words. "You look hungry." She turned the card over. Nothing on the back. She stood in the doorway of her room with the card in her hand and the soup getting cold on the tray, and the first genuinely unnerving feeling of the evening crawling up her spine. Someone in this hotel knew she was here. Someone had noticed her in the lobby. Someone had sent soup to a woman they didn't know. Except they did know her name. She should have been frightened. Some part of her registered that this was the appropriate response. Instead, and she couldn't entirely explain this, she was just tired. Too tired for another threat tonight. She sat down, and she ate the soup, and it was the best thing she'd tasted in longer than she could remember, which probably said more about the state of her marriage than it said about the soup. She didn't sleep until 4 in the morning. When she finally did, she dreamed about the charity gala 3 months ago. The one Hyun had dragged her to in Gangnam. She'd worn a blue dress that he'd called understated when he meant boring. She'd stood at the edge of the room nursing a glass of water while he worked the crowd, and at some point she'd looked up and found a man across the room looking at her. Not the way men sometimes look at women in rooms like that. Assessing, calculating, checking for a ring. This was different. He was simply watching her with an expression she couldn't name. When she'd looked back at him, he didn't look away. She'd been the one to look away. In the morning, she remembered his face. Dark suit. Jaw like it had been cut from something. Eyes that were perfectly still in the way that only deeply controlled people managed. She had no idea who he was. She had never found out. She was thinking about this, about the gala, about that face, about why her dreaming brain had chosen tonight of all nights to replay it, when her phone rang at 7:45 in the morning and it was Hyun, and the sound of his name on her screen made her stomach clench like she'd swallowed a fist. She let it ring. Then she got up, showered, and made a list. The list was practical. It was the kind of list you make when emotion is a luxury you cannot currently afford. Divorce attorney, bank accounts, housing, Immigration status. She was in Korea on a spousal visa, and that was a problem she had 48 hours to think about before it became an emergency. Freelance income. Portfolio. References. She was on her third cup of coffee and had filled 2 pages of the hotel notepad when she realized she was actually calm. Not numb. Calm. The difference mattered. Numb was what she'd been for most of the last 3 years. This was different. This was the feeling of someone who has finally stopped waiting for things to improve on their own. She was done waiting. She was also, she understood by noon, effectively homeless in a foreign country with limited legal standing and a husband who had 2 years head start on protecting his assets. She was not going to pretend that wasn't terrifying. It was. But terrified and done waiting could coexist, she was finding. They were doing it right now. She spent the afternoon making calls. Her attorney in Atlanta, who told her to document everything and connected her to a Korean family law specialist. The family law specialist who told her the same thing and added that her visa situation was manageable but time-sensitive. Her sister Denise, who said, "I'll fly to Seoul tomorrow," and meant it, and whom Amara talked out of it only because there was nothing Denise could do in Seoul that she couldn't do better from Atlanta with access to their parents and a functioning support network. "Are you sure you're okay?" Denise asked. "I'm not okay," Amara said. "But I'm not falling apart either." "That's very on brand for you." "Is it?" "Amara, you once drove yourself to the emergency room with a broken wrist because you didn't want to bother anyone. That was one time." "That was twice." She almost laughed. Not quite, but almost. "I'll call you tomorrow." She hung up and looked at the hotel notepad with its 2 pages of logistics and thought. I need a plan for tonight. Not a life plan, not a 5-year strategy, just tonight. She couldn't stay in this room on Hyun's corporate account past checkout tomorrow morning, and she wasn't going back to the apartment, and the family law specialist had told her not to access the joint accounts yet until they had a strategy in place. She ordered room service dinner with her personal card, ate it at the desk, and told herself this was temporary. Everything was temporary. The trick was surviving the temporary parts long enough to reach whatever came next. At 9:30 in the evening, she took her coat and went downstairs. Not for any reason she could articulate. She just needed to be somewhere that wasn't that room. The hotel bar was quiet on a Wednesday. She took a seat at the far end of the counter, ordered a glass of wine she didn't particularly want, and sat with her shoulders slightly forward the way you do when you're not inviting conversation. She had been sitting there for perhaps 20 minutes when she became aware that someone had taken the seat 2 down from hers. She didn't look up immediately. She was constructing a mental timeline of the next 72 hours, and she needed to concentrate. Then the man ordered, and the bartender's entire posture changed. It was subtle. A server who has been working the night shift for 4 hours does not straighten their spine and become attentive for just anyone. Amara had worked enough corporate events to recognize the shift. This was deference, real deference, not performance. She looked up. He was already looking at her. It took her a full 3 seconds to place him. And then she did. The gala, 3 months ago. The dark suit, the perfectly still eyes. He looked exactly the same. He also looked like he'd been expecting to see her, which was impossible, except that it also wasn't nothing. "You sent the soup," she said. It came out more certain than she intended. He didn't deny it. He turned his glass on the bar once, slowly. "You hadn't eaten. How did you know my room number?" "I know most things that happen in this hotel." That should have frightened her. "Are you staying here?" "No," he said, "but the family that owns this building owes me a favor." She looked at him. He looked back at her. His face gave away very little, but there was something in it. Not warmth exactly, but attention. The specific attention of someone who was genuinely watching rather than performing. "I remember you," she said, "from the Park Group Gala, in August." Something shifted in his expression. Barely. "I remember you as well. You watched me for most of the evening. You were the only person in that room who looked like you didn't want to be there." "I didn't want to be there." "I know," he said. She should have asked how. She didn't. She was too tired for the performance of normal caution, and there was something about the way he sat, unhurried, completely settled in himself, with none of the restlessness that characterized most of the powerful men she'd spent 8 years watching at parties, that made her too exhausted to perform wariness she didn't entirely feel. "You're Jinwoo Kang," she said. She'd heard the name somewhere tonight, from the desk staff whispering when she came through the lobby. She wasn't sure why she knew it was him. "Yes," he said simply, "and you know who I am." "You're Amara Brooks," he said, "currently estranged from Hyun Park as of approximately 11 o'clock last night." He said it without any cruelty, just information, and you're trying to figure out where you're going to sleep on Thursday. She stared at him. "You checked in under your maiden name, sir," he said. That was smart. "Who are you?" she asked. Not his name, she had that. She meant the other thing, the thing underneath. He looked at her steadily. "I'm someone who has a number of reasons to dislike your husband," he said. "And I'm someone who, 3 months ago at a charity gala, watched a woman stand alone at the edge of a room for 2 hours and thought she deserved better than what she was getting." The bar was quiet around them. Someone's jazz playlist moved softly through the speakers. Amara held her wine glass and looked at the man across from her, this controlled, watchful, clearly dangerous man, and felt something she hadn't felt in a very long time, seen. It was a dangerous feeling to have. She was aware of that. She was also aware that her caution reserves were running at something close to empty, and that the combination made her more honest than she would otherwise have been. "My visa status is tied to my marriage," she said. "I have 48 hours before that becomes urgent. I have enough money for 3 weeks if I'm careful, and I have a freelance client base that could sustain me if I can get legal authorization to work independently. My husband has a 2-year head start on protecting his assets and an influential family and a team of attorneys on retainer." She set her glass down. "And I have absolutely no idea why I'm telling you this." "Because you haven't had anyone to tell," he said. She looked at him. "I have a proposition," Jinwoo Kang said. He said it the way a person says something they've been thinking about for a while. Not impulsive, measured. "It will solve several of your immediate problems and create a few new ones. You should hear it before you decide whether you want to." "What kind of proposition?" He turned his glass again. "The kind," he said, "that starts with your husband seeing your face on his phone tomorrow morning and understanding that the woman he discarded last night is standing beside the one person in Seoul he cannot afford to make an enemy of." The jazz moved through the bar. Somewhere across the city, Hyun Park was probably already asleep, already certain she would come to her senses, already planning the language of the conversation where she agreed to his terms. Amara looked at Jinwoo Kang and thought about 8 years, about 3 miscarriages and family dinners, and 48 hours of legal urgency, and a hotel room she couldn't afford, and a marriage that had been hollow for so long she'd stopped being able to remember the shape it had once held. "Tell me the proposition," she said. Jinwoo Kang did not rush. That was the first thing she noticed. Most powerful men Amara had encountered in 8 years of Seoul corporate life operated at a specific frequency, always slightly ahead of the conversation, always angling, always making sure you understood that their time cost more than yours. Hyun was like that. His father was worse. Even Hyun's attorney had that quality, the sense of a clock running behind his eyes that only he could see. Jinwoo set his glass down and waited, like he had all night, like he was genuinely prepared to sit here until she was ready to hear what he had to say, and not 1 second before. "You know Hyun," she said, "not just know of him. We've crossed paths." "In what context?" He looked at her for a moment. "Business," he said. The word was accurate and told her nothing, and she understood immediately that this was intentional. "What kind of proposition?" she said. "Specifically." "You need 3 things immediately," Jinwoo said. "Legal standing in this country that isn't tied to your marriage. Income that doesn't depend on Hyun's goodwill or access to your joint accounts. And enough public visibility that Hyun cannot manage the narrative of what happened last night before you've had time to protect yourself." He said all of this quietly, without drama, like he was reading from a list he'd already made. "I can give you all 3. Amara felt the back of her neck tighten. Not fear exactly, something more complicated. "In exchange for what?" "In exchange for your presence," he said. "At my side. Publicly. Starting this weekend." She stared at him. "There is a gala Saturday evening," Jinwoo said. Every significant name in Seoul business will be there, including Hyun Park and his family. He picked up his glass. I would like you to attend with me. As what? Amara said. He looked at her steadily. As whoever you choose to present yourself as. I won't define it for you, but the city will draw its own conclusions. You want to use me to antagonize my husband. I want to offer you a platform, he said. What you do on it is your choice. She laughed. It came out shorter than she intended. That's a very clean way to describe it. It is clean, he said. I'm not going to pretend otherwise. I have reasons to want Hyun Park off balance. You have reasons to want him to understand what he gave up. Those two things happen to point in the same direction. And the rest of it, legal standing, income. I have a position available, Jinwoo said. Creative Director, Kang Global Holdings. It's a real position. The work is real. I'm not inventing a salary to make this easier for you to accept. I've needed someone in that role for 4 months, and I haven't found anyone whose work I respect. He paused. I've seen your portfolio. You're better than anything Hyun ever gave you credit for. The bar was very quiet. The jazz had shifted to something slower. Amara became aware that her wine glass was empty, and she didn't remember finishing it. You've seen my portfolio, she said. I told you, I know most things. That's not an answer. No, he agreed. It isn't. He didn't elaborate. She should walk away. She understood that. She was sitting in a hotel bar at 10 o'clock on the worst night of her adult life, talking to a man she didn't know who had sent soup to her room and had information about her he shouldn't have, and was offering her a solution that was structured in ways she couldn't fully see yet. Every reasonable instinct she possessed said to take her coat and go back upstairs and call the family law attorney in the morning. What do you get out of it, she said. Past the gala. If I take the position and I'm visible and Hyun sees us together, what does that do for you specifically? Jinwoo was quiet for a moment. Hyun Park, he said finally, has been building alliances in this city through a combination of legitimate business and associations that are less legitimate. He has made himself appear more connected, more powerful, and more untouchable than he actually is. Having his estranged wife publicly aligned with me disrupts that appearance in ways that will take him months to recover from. He set his glass down. He has also done specific damage to specific people I care about. I am not in a position to address that damage directly without escalating a situation I prefer to manage carefully. But I am in a position to remove the social and professional armor he's spent years building. It was the most honest thing anyone had said to her in longer than she could remember. You're using me as a weapon, she said. I'm offering you a weapon, he said, and handing you the grip. She sat with that. I need to think, she said. Of course. And I need you to understand something. She turned to face him fully. She was tired, and her eyes felt sandy, and her composure was held together with something close to its last threads. But she looked at him directly because she'd learned a long time ago that direct was the only thing powerful men couldn't dismiss. If I do this, I am not a prop. I'm not something you deploy. If I'm in that room Saturday night, I'm there as myself. Not as a symbol, not as a provocation. Myself. Jinwoo looked at her for a long moment. Yes, he said, quietly, like the word cost him something or like it didn't cost him anything at all, and she couldn't tell which. I'll give you an answer tomorrow, she said. She took her coat. She left without looking back, which cost her more than she expected, because some part of her wanted to look back and she didn't trust herself to understand why. She didn't sleep. She'd lay on top of the hotel bedspread in the dark with her coat still on because the room had gotten cold and she'd stopped caring enough to adjust the thermostat, and she ran the conversation through her head 4 times from the beginning. She was looking for the angle she'd missed, the thing he wasn't saying, because men like that always had a thing they weren't saying. He knew her portfolio. He knew her room number. He knew she'd checked in under her maiden name, which meant he knew the name she'd been born with and not just the name she'd married into. He knew the timeline of last night. 11 o'clock, he'd said. She'd left the apartment at 11:07. She'd looked at her phone in the cab. That specificity was not an accident. She thought about what he'd said. Hyun has done specific damage to specific people I care about. He hadn't named them. He'd offered her the truth of the thing without the details, which was a specific kind of honesty, the kind that told you something real while keeping the edges protected. She thought about Hyun, about the version of Hyun she'd married, driven, brilliant, occasionally kind, a man who brought her coffee exactly right in the first year and forgot how she took it by the third. About the version of Hyun she'd watched become someone else, incrementally, so slowly she'd told herself it was her perception shifting rather than him. She thought about the open marriage papers sitting on the marble dining table in the apartment with the Han River view, and the Belgian linen and the reading lamp from Insadong. She picked up her phone and texted the family law specialist. I may have an employment opportunity. Kang Global Holdings. Creative Director. Would employment there affect my visa options? It was past 11. She didn't expect a response until morning. She got one in 4 minutes. If the offer is genuine and properly documented, yes, significantly. We should talk in the morning. She put her phone face down on the mattress and stared at the ceiling and thought, this is the most important decision you will make in the next decade. Do not make it from anger. Do not make it from exhaustion. Do not make it because a controlled, watchful man in a hotel bar looked at you like you were worth watching. She made it anyway, at approximately 2 in the morning, lying on her back with her coat still on, and her brain finally too tired to argue with itself. She would take the meeting. That wasn't the same as taking the offer. But she would take the meeting. Morning came gray and cold. She showered, dressed, ordered coffee from room service, and called Jinwoo Kong's number, which she had not asked for and which had appeared on a small card under her coffee cup when room service arrived, alongside a note that said simply, "Whenever you're ready." She almost threw the card across the room. She was beginning to understand that Jinwoo Kong operated with a particular kind of thoroughness that was going to take some adjusting to. He picked up on the second ring. I have conditions, she said. Good morning, he said. I have conditions, she repeated. A pause. She thought she heard him exhale something that might have been the beginning of a laugh, but she couldn't be sure. Tell me. The position is real. I have approval authority for any creative work that carries my name. I don't produce anything I don't stand behind. Agreed. I need the employment contract documented before Saturday. My attorney reviews it. I'll have it delivered by 3 this afternoon. And the arrangement between us... She stopped, restarted. Whatever this looks like publicly, privately, I need it clear. You don't make decisions about my life without telling me first. If something is coming, I need to know before it arrives. A longer pause this time. That's a reasonable condition, he said. It's a non-negotiable condition. Yes, he said. I heard the difference. She held the phone. Okay, she said. I'll send a car at 6 on Saturday. I'll find my own way there. This time she was certain she heard something shift in his breathing. Of course, he said. She hung up and sat down on the edge of the bed and pressed her palms flat against her thighs and breathed. In, out, in, out. She had just agreed to walk into the most surveilled social event in Seoul beside the man the entire city either feared or owed money to. 24 hours after her husband handed her divorce-adjacent paperwork across a marble dining table. She thought, Hyun is going to see this on his phone before the gala is over. Good. Bolch. The contract arrived at 2:47. It was thorough. Her attorney in Atlanta called it unusually fair, in a tone that suggested she'd been expecting predatory language and found none. The Korean family law specialist confirmed her visa pathway. The creative director title was real, the salary was real, the scope of authority was real. She signed it at 4:15 with the hotel pen, photographed every page, and emailed the copies to both attorneys. Then she called Denise. Tell me everything, Denise said, and Amara did. All of it. And Denise was quiet for most of it, which was unusual because Denise was almost never quiet. When Amara finished, there were approximately 5 seconds of silence. So let me understand, Denise said. Hyun shows his whole entire self last night, and 24 hours later you have a job and a date to a gala with the Korean Mafia? He's not. I don't actually know what he is. Amara. He runs a legitimate holding company. Amara, baby, listen to me. Do you feel safe? She thought about it honestly. I feel like he wants something and is being straightforward about what it is, she said, which is more than I can say for the last 3 years of my marriage. Denise made a sound. That's the most depressing sentence you have ever said to me. I know. Be careful. I will. And buy a new dress. Not whatever Hyun would have picked, something you would pick. She almost laughed. This time it came closer. Okay. And call me after the gala. Okay? And Amara? Denise paused. You're not starting over. You're starting. There's a difference. She held that for a moment. Then she said goodnight and hung up and went to find a dress. She found it in a boutique in Cheongdam-dong that she'd walked past 100 times in 8 years and never gone into because Hyun thought the aesthetic was excessive. It was crimson. Not a soft red, not a wine, not a color that apologized for itself. Crimson, deep, and unarguable, with a structure to the bodice that didn't require anything underneath it except confidence, which she was going to have to manufacture somewhat, but she was used to manufacturing things. She bought it with her personal card and walked out with it in a white bag and didn't feel guilty about any of it, which was new. Saturday arrived before she was ready, and also exactly on time. She dressed alone in the hotel room, which she'd extended with her first paycheck advance. Jinwoo's office had processed her paperwork Friday morning, and the advance had appeared in her account Friday afternoon with no fanfare and no message attached. She'd stood looking at it on her phone for a long time. Then she'd extended the hotel room through the following week and started looking at apartments. She did her own makeup. She had always done her own makeup at Hyun's events. He had opinions about the style he preferred, and she had spent years translating those opinions into compliance that looked like personal choice. Tonight she did it the way she would have done it if nobody's opinion existed but hers. When she looked in the mirror, she didn't recognize herself immediately. Then she did. She recognized the version of herself she'd been before Seoul. She was ready at 8. The gala started at 8:30. She took a cab. Dad. The hotel ballroom was exactly what she expected and nothing like what she was prepared for. Every apex of Seoul's society was in that room: business, politics, old money, new money, and the specific category of person who occupied the space between legitimate power and other kinds of power, the ones whose names appeared in business journals and in whispered conversations, sometimes in the same sentence. She walked in alone. She felt the shift in the room the way you feel weather changing, heads turning. Not all at once. It was subtle enough that only someone paying attention would have caught it. But she had spent 8 years paying attention in rooms exactly like this one, watching the way attention moved, learning the social geometry. She saw it. They weren't looking at the crimson dress, though that didn't hurt. They were looking at her because they knew her face as Hyun Park's wife, as the woman who had shown up in his shadow at 100 events in this city, and they were trying to reconcile her presence here, alone, without him, in a color that was the opposite of invisible. She got a glass of water from a passing tray and positioned herself near the edge of the room, which was habit, and then she stopped herself and moved toward the center, which was choice. She had been standing in the center of the room for approximately 4 minutes when she felt the room shift again. Different this time. Quieter. The way a room goes quiet when someone enters who changes the weight distribution of the air. She looked toward the entrance. Jinwoo Kang walked in the way water finds level. Not dramatically, not with performance, just inevitably. Dark suit. He moved through the room, and the room reorganized itself around him without seeming to try. She watched 2 men change their conversation angle to track him. She watched a woman in green put her champagne down. He saw her immediately. She had the sense he'd seen her before she'd seen him. He crossed the room. Not quickly. He didn't do anything quickly, she was learning, but directly. "You came," he said. "I said I would." "You did." He looked at her, at the dress briefly, and then back at her face, which she appreciated. "Are you ready?" "For what specifically?" "For the moment, approximately 4 minutes from now," he said, "when Hyun Park arrives with his family and sees you standing here." Her stomach dropped exactly 1 floor. She recovered quickly. "He's coming tonight." He's on the guest list. He attends every year. Jinwoo's voice was even. I assumed you knew? She hadn't known. She should have checked the guest list. She added it to the internal list of things she needed to think ahead about in this new life where she was making decisions instead of accommodating them. Okay, she said. Okay? Yes. She straightened slightly. Let him come. Something moved in Jinwoo's face. It wasn't a smile. It was something smaller and more controlled than a smile. But it was there. He offered his arm. She took it. The fabric of his jacket was something expensive under her fingers. He was warmer than she expected, or maybe she had just forgotten what it felt like to stand close to someone and feel their warmth instead of their absence. They were standing like that, her hand at his arm, him turned slightly toward her in conversation. When the room shifted for the third time that night, and she looked up and found Hyun Park 15 feet away, standing at the entrance with his mother, his father, and a step behind them, Jisoo. Hyun's face did something she had never seen it do in 8 years. It went completely blank. Not calm. Blank. The expression of someone who has opened a door expecting one thing and found something they had no category for. His mother looked from Amara to Jinwoo and back again, and her face did the opposite of going blank. Jisoo looked at Amara's dress. Amara looked at all of them for exactly 2 seconds, which was one more second than she needed. Then she turned back to Jinwoo and said quietly, "You were right about the 4 minutes." "I usually am," he said. His voice was perfectly level, but he was watching her face with that particular attention she was still learning not to be unnerved by. "How are you doing?" "I'm fine." "You don't have to be fine." "I know," she said. "I'm fine anyway." She heard Hyun moving behind her. She didn't turn. She was not going to turn. She kept her eyes on Jinwoo's face and focused on slowing her breathing down, one breath at a time, because her heart was hitting her ribs in a way she hoped wasn't visible, and her hands wanted to do something, and she was not going to let them. "Amara." Hyun's voice came from approximately 6 feet behind her, public voice, controlled. The one he used when he needed to manage how something looked before he managed how it actually was. She turned, slowly. She was aware of Jinwoo shifting slightly beside her. Not toward Hyun, not threateningly, just present. She felt the shift. "Hyun," she said. He looked terrible, not externally. Externally, he was as composed as always, suit perfect, jaw set. But his eyes were doing something she recognized from the rare times she'd seen him caught genuinely off guard. "I didn't expect to see you here." "I imagine not," she said. His eyes moved to Jinwoo. Something crossed his face, something fast and dark that he covered immediately. "Mr. Kang." "Park," Jinwoo said. One word. The economy of it was exquisite. "I wasn't aware you two had a connection," Hyun said. He was looking at Amara now, working to keep his voice at business dinner neutral. "There's a great deal you weren't aware of," Amara said. The muscles in Hyun's jaw moved. "Could I speak with you, privately?" "No," she said. A pause. Brief, but she saw his mother register it. "Amara, I'm in the middle of a conversation, Hyun." She said it with the exact tone she'd heard him use on her 100 times at events like this one. Not unkind, just finished. "We can schedule something through my attorney." She watched Hyun process this. She watched him look at Jinwoo again and calculate, and find the calculation didn't add up the way he needed it to, and then she watched him do the thing he'd always done when cornered. He retreated to dignity, straightened his jacket, and said quietly and precisely, "We'll talk soon." "Maybe," Amara said. He moved away. His mother took one more long look at Amara's dress and followed. Jisoo passed without looking at her, which was its own kind of answer. Jinwoo didn't say anything for a moment. "You didn't need me for that," he said finally. "No," she said. "I didn't." "Good." He said it like something had been confirmed. She didn't know what. Kosam. The gala moved around them. She met 3 people whose names she recognized from the business press, all of whom treated her with a careful, recalibrated attention that she understood. They were reassessing. The math had changed, and they were running the new numbers. She found she didn't mind it. Being assessed on her own terms, without Hyun's narrative attached, was something she hadn't felt in years. At some point, Jinwoo handed her a glass of something that wasn't wine and said, "You haven't eaten." "You have a fixation," she said. "I have an observation." She took the glass. "You do this often. Manage people's intake at industry events?" "Only people I notice," he said. She looked at him sideways. "And you noticed me 3 months ago at the Park Group Gala?" "Yes." "Why?" He was quiet for a moment. "Because you were the most interesting person in the room," he said, "and the least interested in being there." She sat with that. "That's not why you approached me Wednesday night." "No," he said. "It's not." "Tell me the other reason." He looked at her directly. "Hyun Park has been moving against members of my organization," he said. Not quietly. He said it with the same weight he gave everything, which was somehow more unsettling than if he'd whispered it. Not directly. Through intermediaries, pressuring suppliers, interfering with licensing applications, feeding information to regulatory bodies in ways that are difficult to trace, but not impossible to identify. He paused. He has been doing this for 18 months. I became aware of it 8 months ago. 8 months ago. 2 months before the charity gala. "You were watching him at the gala," she said. "Not me." "I was watching him," he agreed. "And then I noticed you. And I watched you for the rest of the evening instead." He said it plainly. That part was not strategy. The room moved around them. Someone laughed too loudly near the bar. A camera flash went off somewhere, press or social media, or both. "You should know," Jinwoo said, "that someone photographed us when you took my arm. That photograph will be on 3 gossip platforms by morning and in 2 business publications by Monday." "I know," she said. She'd seen the camera. She'd made a choice. "I know what I walked into tonight." He looked at her with that particular steadiness. "Yes," he said. "I believe you do." Her phone vibrated in her clutch. She didn't reach for it. She already knew who it was. She reached for it an hour later in the car back to the hotel. The cab she'd taken herself, per her own terms, and found 4 messages from Hyun in descending order of composure. The first was controlled, the second was pressured, the third used the word embarrassment. The fourth said, "Call me. This is beyond whatever point you're trying to make." She read all 4 and set the phone face down on the seat beside her, beyond the point she was trying to make. He still believed this was about making a point. He still believed she was a move in a game he was running, a variable that had behaved unexpectedly and would eventually return to its correct position. She looked out the cab window at Seoul sliding past. The Han River caught the light in the distance. She had stood at a window watching that river for 8 years and told herself it was enough. She picked up her phone and opened the message from her apartment search contact. A studio in Mapo, available Monday, in her budget, with a separate workspace. She typed, "I'll take it. Send me the contract." The cab moved through the city. Her city now, or beginning to be. Not Hyun's. Not the version she'd built around his life. Something with her name on it, finally, after all the years of building things that carried only his. And then her phone buzzed with a number she didn't recognize, and the message read, "We need to talk. Not about the gala. About what Hyun showed my employer tonight. He has photographs." She stared at the message. "Photographs of you and Kong taken at a meeting 3 days before the gala, before your husband gave you the papers. Kang needs to know." She read the message 3 times. The cab was moving through Hanam-dong, past the lit storefronts and the late pedestrians, past the kind of ordinary Saturday night that had no idea it was sitting next to something that had just changed shape. Amara held her phone with both hands without meaning to. She noticed this, noticed the tightening of her fingers, and made herself loosen them deliberately. "Photographs of you and Kang taken at a meeting 3 days before the gala, before your husband gave you the papers." She did the math. 3 days before the gala was Wednesday. Wednesday night, the hotel bar. Someone had photographed them in the bar. She typed back, "Who is this?" The reply came in under a minute. "Someone who works for Hyun, or worked. He showed those photos to my supervisor this morning, and I was let go by noon. I'm not his ally. I'm telling you because you need to know what he's building. She stared at the screen. He's going to argue the whole thing was staged, that you and Kang planned it before he even gave you the papers, that you were already involved with Kang, that the open marriage conversation was a pretext you used to leave so the affair looked like his fault. The cab stopped at a light. Outside the window, a couple was arguing on the sidewalk. Not loudly, just the low, sustained intensity of two people who had been having the same fight for a long time. Amara watched them without seeing them. She called Jinwoo. He picked up on the first ring, which meant he was awake, which meant he was probably already aware. "You know," she said. A beat. "I know. How long?" "I became aware of the photographs approximately 2 hours ago." 2 hours ago, they had been standing in the ballroom together, and he had known, and he had not told her. She felt something go cold in her chest. "You didn't tell me." "I didn't want to affect how you handled the conversation with Hyun. That was not your call to make." "No," he said. "It wasn't. You're right." She waited for him to say something else. He didn't. He just sat with having been wrong about it, which was more unsetful than an argument would have been. "What do the photographs show?" she said. "Us at the bar, seated close, talking. There are 3 images. In one of them you're leaning forward slightly and I'm looking directly at you." He paused. Out of context, they look like what Hyun wants them to look like. Which is? An intimate meeting, prearranged, before your separation. She pressed her fingers against her sternum and breathed in, out. Can he use them? In the divorce proceedings, potentially, as evidence of an established relationship that predates the marital breakdown. It doesn't change the legal facts. His infidelity is documented, the timeline is documented, but it muddies the narrative. It gives him something to point at. Jinwoo's voice was even, steady, exactly calibrated, and she was beginning to understand that this was not composure. It was control. There was a difference. More damaging is what he's doing with them socially. He's distributing them selectively. Board members of 3 companies I work with received copies tonight. She closed her eyes. The implication is that I engineered your marriage's end to acquire a business asset, Jinwoo said, that you were a willing participant, that everything you did at the gala tonight was performance of a pre-existing plan. Was it? She said. Silence. Was it engineered? She said. Before Wednesday, before the bar. Did you know what Hyun was going to do? The silence lasted exactly long enough for her to understand that the answer was complicated. Tell me the truth, she said. Right now, or this ends tonight. I knew, Jinwoo said carefully, that Hyun had been building toward a separation strategy. I knew he had been in contact with family attorneys. I knew approximately when he intended to move. A breath. I did not know the specific form it would take. I did not arrange to be in that hotel. I was there for a separate meeting. When I saw you in the lobby, that was not planned. But you knew I would be vulnerable. Yes. And you had a proposition ready. I had thought about what I would say, he said, if I ever had the opportunity to approach you. Yes. The cab pulled up to the Intercontinental. She didn't move. The driver glanced in the rearview mirror and then looked away with the professionalism of someone who ferried difficult conversations across Seoul for a living. You watched me for 3 months, she said. Yes. And you let me believe Wednesday night was coincidence. I never said it was coincidence. You never said it wasn't. Another silence. That's true, he said. She got out of the cab. The night air was cold and sharp, and she stood on the pavement outside the hotel and looked at the lights of the city and thought, how many of the things I've decided in the last 72 hours were decisions I made freely, and how many were the inevitable product of being moved into position by someone who is very good at moving people into positions? I need to think, she said into the phone. Amara? I'll call you tomorrow. She hung up. Asad. She didn't sleep again. 2 nights in a row of not sleeping was starting to put a specific kind of pressure behind her eyes, the kind that made colors slightly wrong and distances slightly unreliable. She sat at the hotel desk with her laptop open and worked through what she actually knew versus what she had assumed. What she knew. Hyun had given her the papers Wednesday. She had left. She had encountered Jinwoo in the bar. Jinwoo had made an offer. She had accepted. She had signed a real contract with a real salary. The gala had been real. What she had assumed, that Wednesday night was chance, that Jinwoo's interest in her was separate from his interest in Hyun, that she had made her decisions with full information. What she now understood, Jinwoo Kang had known Hyun was about to act. He had thought about what he would say to her if he could. When she appeared in his orbit, he had said it. The question was whether that made what followed a manipulation or an opportunity that was honest about what it was. She thought about what he'd said in the bar. "I'm someone who has a number of reasons to dislike your husband," he had told her. He had told her the arrangement served his purposes. He had handed her the conditions of the deal and let her negotiate and let her walk out and call him the next morning with conditions of her own. He had agreed to every one of them. She thought about what he hadn't told her, that he'd known the timeline, that his presence that night had context she wasn't given. Those were different things. She was trying to be honest with herself about which one mattered more. At 4 a.m, she made a list. She did it on paper with the hotel pen because paper was harder to delete than a document and she wanted the friction. On one side, what she had now: contract, income, legal pathway, her name on work that was actually hers. On the other side, what she'd had 3 days ago: a hotel room booked by her husband and a marriage that had been hollow for 3 years and 48 hours before her visa became an emergency. She looked at the list for a long time. Then she called the unknown number from the text message and said, "I need to meet you." The woman's name was So-hyun. She was 29, had worked in Hyun's corporate communications department for 2 years, and had been terminated Saturday morning because she had refused to help craft the narrative Hyun was building around the photographs. She met Amara at a coffee shop in Yongsan at 7 a.m, already on her second coffee, wearing the look of someone who had also not slept. "He started planning this 3 weeks ago," So-hyun said. She kept her voice low. The coffee shop was nearly empty, but she kept it low anyway. After the quarterly board meeting, one of the Kang affiliates voted down a supply contract Hyun had been maneuvering for since spring. He came back from that meeting and went into his office and didn't come out for 4 hours. Amara held her coffee cup. He connected the vote to Jinwoo. He knew Kang was behind it. So-hyun looked at her directly. She had the kind of face that was too tired for performance. He started pulling everything he could find on Mr. Kang, and on you. There's a file. He's had someone watching you for 4 months. Your movements, your freelance contacts, your emails. She stopped. He had access to your email account. The coffee shop was warm and smelled like something roasting, and Amara felt the bottom drop out of her stomach with a quietness that was almost worse than noise. How? The household Wi-Fi. He had a logging program installed. He's been reading your professional correspondence for 4 months. So-hyun set her cup down. He knew about the Kang Gala invitation because you received an email about the event from a contact in his orbit. He thought you were already in contact with Kang's people. I wasn't. I know. But he didn't believe that, and once he stopped believing it, he built a version of events around it. She exhaled. The open marriage papers weren't a marriage decision. They were a legal instrument. He needed you to leave voluntarily, on the record, before he moved against Kang's licensing applications. If you're the injured party who walked out, he gets the apartment, the joint assets, and a narrative where you were already involved with his business rival. The divorce proceedings favor him entirely. Amara sat very still. He's been building this for months, So-hyun said. The open marriage, the timing, the photographs from Wednesday night. He had someone in that hotel already, someone watching for Mr. Kang's movements. When you appeared in the bar, he thought it confirmed everything he'd suspected. It confirmed nothing, Amara said. Her voice came out level. She didn't know how. I know that, So-hyun said, but the photographs don't show that. Amara put her cup down very carefully. She was doing the specific calculation she'd been doing since the cab ride, the one where she added up what she'd understood versus what had actually been happening, and the difference between those two numbers was widening every hour. Why are you telling me this? She said. So-hyun looked at her. Because I worked for that man for 2 years, and I watched how he talked about you in meetings. She said it flatly. Like you were a liability he was managing, like you were a position on a balance sheet that had gone negative. She picked her cup back up. And because he fired me for not lying, and I am very tired of the company of men who think everyone else's version of the truth is negotiable. Amara looked at her for a long moment. The email access, she said. Can that be documented? I have the IT log request he filed, Soyun said. He went through an outside contractor, not the internal team, but the contractor kept records. Would you testify to that? A pause. Short. Yes, Soyun said. Amara picked up her phone and called her family law attorney's emergency line. But the attorney called her back within 20 minutes. Amara relayed everything. The surveillance, the email access, the 4-month monitoring, Sohyun's account of the communication strategy. There was typing on the other end of the line. Then, if this is documentable, it changes your position significantly. Unauthorized access to private communications is actionable. Combined with the documented infidelity, the timeline manipulation, more typing. Can you be in my office at 11? Yes, Amara said. She walked out of the coffee shop into the cold Yongsan morning and stood on the sidewalk with her breath coming out in small white clouds and thought about 4 months. 4 months of Hyun reading her emails, 4 months of her composing professional correspondence in what she believed was privacy, and him reading it from whatever room he was in, building his case. She thought about the fertility conversations she'd had with her doctor over email. She thought about the messages to Denise she'd sent from her work laptop. She thought about how many times she'd written something honest, something private, something that was only hers, and he had read it. Her phone rang, Jinwoo. She let it ring twice. Then she answered. I need to tell you something, she said. And then you need to tell me everything you know, not the curated version. Everything. A pause. All right. Hyun has had someone watching me for 4 months. He had access to my email. He constructed the open marriage as a legal strategy, not a personal decision. The photographs from Wednesday. He had someone in the hotel already. He was watching for you, not for me. And I was in the frame. She stopped, started again. He has been building a narrative where I'm complicit in a scheme against him, and the gala last night handed him exactly what he needed to complete it. Silence on the other end. Then, come to my office. I have an attorney meeting at 11. After that, he said, come to my office. Jinwoo. She said his name for the first time without the distance of formality, and she felt him register it. If there is anything else you haven't told me, I need you to tell me before I walk into that attorney meeting, because whatever you're holding back, Hyun may already have it, and I cannot walk in there blind. A long pause, the kind of pause that had weight. There is one thing, he said. She closed her eyes. Tell me. The supply contract that was voted down 3 weeks ago, he said, the one that set Hyun on this path. I arranged that vote. He said it without apology, without performance, just the fact. I had been building toward it for 8 months since I identified what he was doing to my operations. The vote was the first move. The gala was meant to be the second. A breath. I did not anticipate that he would move so quickly. I did not anticipate the surveillance, and I did not anticipate a pause. You, the person you actually are. I did not anticipate that. She stood on the sidewalk in the cold Seoul morning and felt the full shape of what she was inside. Not just the arrangement, not just the transaction, but the larger game she'd been dropped into without a map. I'm a piece on your board, she said. You were, he said, and then you weren't. That's a very convenient distinction. I know, he said. I can't make it less convenient. I can only tell you it's true. She didn't say anything. What do you need right now, he said. Not what I owe you, not what this situation requires. What do you need? She thought about it, honestly. Not what she should need, not what the situation demanded, but what she actually needed in this cold morning with the city moving around her and 8 years of her life in the process of dismantling itself. I need Hyun to not be able to use those photographs, she said. I can manage that. And I need to know that whatever you manage, you tell me you're doing it first. No more decisions made around me without me. Yes, he said, immediately, without qualifier. And I need to get through the attorney meeting, she said. So I'm going to hang up now. Amara. She waited. I'm sorry, he said. 2 words, the same economy he gave everything. But they were there. She hung up and hailed a cab and rode across the city with her hands folded in her lap and her breathing steady, and the specific knowledge that she was operating inside something much larger and more deliberately constructed than she'd understood 72 hours ago. The attorney meeting lasted 2 hours. Her attorney, a compact, precise woman named Choi Yewon, who had been practicing family law in Seoul for 19 years and had the energy of someone who had seen every version of this particular war and had stopped being surprised by any of it, went through Soyeon's information with focused attention. The email access is your strongest asset, Choi said. If documented, it constitutes a privacy violation under Korean information law and potentially a criminal matter. It also substantially compromises any argument he makes about the nature of your conduct during the marriage. She folded her hands. He was surveilling you while simultaneously building a case that you were acting against the marriage. The irony will not be lost on a judge. He'll say the open marriage papers were genuine, Amara said, that the surveillance was separate. He can say it. Proving it is more difficult when the timeline shows the surveillance preceding the papers by 4 months. Choi looked at her directly. How is your relationship with Kang Global Holdings? I have a signed contract. I'm employed. And your personal relationship with Kang Jinwoo? Amara met her eyes. Complicated. Choi's expression didn't change. In what direction? He knew more about Hyun's intentions than he told me initially, Amara said. He's told me everything now. Or I believe he has. She paused. He's a strategic person. He made a strategic decision to approach me. I made a decision to accept the arrangement with full understanding that it served his purposes. The question of whether it became something else is... She stopped. Is what? Choi said. Is mine, Amara said. Choi nodded once. Then we proceed, she said. I'll file for divorce on grounds of infidelity and document the email surveillance as a companion matter. If Hyun attempts to introduce the photographs, we introduce the surveillance timeline. He cannot argue your conduct was deceptive while simultaneously admitting he was monitoring your private correspondence. Amara exhaled. There's one more thing, Choi said. She opened a folder. Inside was a photograph, printed on regular paper, slightly grainy. The kind of photograph taken by a phone at a distance. It showed Amara and Jinwoo in the hotel bar. The angle was from slightly above, from a booth near the back. You could see Amara's face clearly. You could see the lean of her body toward the conversation. Hyun's team sent this to my office this morning, Choi said, as a preemptive communication. Typically, that means he wants to negotiate before this reaches filing. He wants me to back down. He wants you to believe he has more than he has, Choi said. The photograph is legally unremarkable. What it actually shows is 2 people having a conversation in a public space. She closed the folder. He's afraid, Ms. Brooks. Afraid men send photographs to attorney offices at 8 in the morning. Amara looked at the closed folder. Then she looked at Choi. File, she said. Today. Kang Global Holdings occupied 3 floors of a glass tower in Yowido that looked like it had been designed to communicate quiet dominance. Not aggressive, quiet. The kind of building that doesn't need to announce itself because everyone already knows it's there. Amara had been here twice before, briefly, to sign paperwork and collect her access card. She had not yet been to Jinwoo's floor. His assistant, a man named Tae, who was young and efficient and seemed constitutionally incapable of being surprised, met her at the elevator and brought her through a corridor that was very calm and very deliberate, in the way that corridors in rooms of power tend to be when someone has thought about what walls communicate. Jinwoo was standing at the window when she entered. He turned. He looked at her the way she was used to him looking at her now, fully, without the glancing quality that most people brought to difficult conversations. She was still deciding whether she found it comforting or unsettling, which probably meant it was both. The attorney, he said. We filed this afternoon, she said. Infidelity, documentation of the surveillance, the IT logs. She set her bag down and sat in one of the chairs across from his desk without waiting to be invited. Hyun sent the photograph to my attorney's office this morning. Choi thinks he's trying to settle before it reaches a judge. Jinwoo nodded. He sat down across from her rather than behind the desk, which she noticed. He called me this morning also, he said. She looked up. Hyun called you. At 7:40, before his attorneys were probably awake. He looked at her steadily. He wanted me to withdraw my association with you. He framed it as a business conversation. Suggested that continued visibility between us was damaging to both of our reputations, and offered a renegotiation of 3 supply contracts he has been blocking as an exchange. The room was very quiet. What did you say? Amara said. I told him the conversation wasn't something I was willing to have, Jinwoo said, and that if he contacted me again outside of formal business channels, I would take it as a declaration of direct hostility. She looked at him for a long moment. He's going to escalate. Yes, Jinwoo said. He will. When he does, it won't just be photographs. He has 4 months of surveillance. He knows my contacts, my clients, probably my financial position. Amara. Jinwoo leaned forward slightly. The movement was small, but it closed the distance between them in a way she felt. I need to tell you something that I have not told you yet, and I need you to hear it as what it is, not as another omission. She held very still. Hyun Park has connections to individuals in this city who operate outside of formal business, he said. I told you he was moving against my organization through intermediaries. What I didn't tell you is that 2 of those intermediaries are connected to a network that handles things beyond supply contracts and regulatory interference. He held her gaze. He has used those connections to pressure people before. People who were in his way. There was a supplier 2 years ago, a woman who was going to testify in a licensing dispute. She withdrew. The following week, her business was vandalized and her daughter's school received an anonymous complaint about her fitness as a parent. Amara felt her hands go cold. I am telling you this, Jinwoo said, because you are now the person most publicly in his way. And I need you to understand that the risk calculus of this situation is different than you may have been operating with. The afternoon light came through the floor-to-ceiling windows at a low angle. Somewhere below them, Seoul moved through its Sunday in complete indifference to the fact that Amara Brooks was sitting in a glass tower in Yoido recalibrating, for the 3rd time in 4 days, exactly how much danger she was in. He would go that far, she said. Not a question. He has gone that far, Jinwoo said, with lower stakes than these. She was quiet for a moment. She was doing the things she'd learned to do in the worst moments. The inventory. What she knew, what she had, what she needed. So the arrangement, she said finally, the original arrangement, me, visible at your side, disrupting his narrative, that's not sufficient anymore. No, Jinwoo said, it isn't. What is sufficient? He looked at her. I can protect you, he said, not performatively, not as part of an arrangement, actually. But it requires you to trust me in ways that go past what we agreed to in the hotel bar. He paused. And I understand if that's not something you're willing to do. Given what I've told you, given what I didn't tell you fast enough. Outside the window, Seoul was enormous and indifferent and lit by a Sunday afternoon that had no idea what was happening inside this glass tower. Amara thought about 4 months of her private life being read by a man she'd been trying to leave for years. She thought about a supplier's daughter and an anonymous complaint to a school. She thought about the crimson dress hanging in her hotel room, and the apartment contract she'd signed Friday night, and the employment contract and the attorneys, and Denise's voice saying, "You're not starting over, you're starting." She thought about Jinwoo Kang, who had approached her with an agenda and told her about it, and then told her about the parts he'd initially left out and had agreed to every condition she set and had said, "I'm sorry," in the specific tone of someone who means it and does not say it often. What does protecting me actually look like? She said. He told her. It was not simple. It was not clean. It involved structures and people, and a version of Seoul she had spent 8 years carefully not seeing. She listened to all of it without interrupting, which cost her something because she had questions at every step, but she held them until he finished. When he was done, she said, "If I agree to this, I'm not a piece on your board anymore." "No," he said. "You're not." "I'm a partner." "Yes." In whatever this actually is, he held her gaze. Yes, he said, in whatever this actually is. The late afternoon light moved across the floor between them. Amara looked at this man, this controlled, dangerous, watchful man who had omitted things and then admitted them and had just handed her the most honest account of risk she had received from anyone in recent memory, and made the decision that she understood, even as she made it, she could not fully take back. Then we do this, she said, but I want Hyun to know it was my choice. Jinwoo looked at her steadily. When this unravels around him, she said, I want him to understand that nobody moved me into this, that I walked in with my eyes open. She held Jinwoo's gaze. Can you arrange for him to understand that? Something moved in Jinwoo's face, that small, controlled thing that was not quite a smile, but lived in its neighborhood. Yes, he said quietly. Her phone buzzed on the desk between them. She looked down. A message from Hyun's attorney, formal and CC'd to Choi. Our client disputes the characterization of events and intends to introduce evidence of prior coordination between Ms. Brooks and Kang Jinwoo in any proceedings. We advise your client to reconsider her current associations before this matter escalates beyond civil resolution. She read it once, set the phone down, looked at Jinwoo. He just threatened me through my attorney, she said. Yes, Jinwoo said. His voice had changed, not louder, quieter, in the specific way that quiet becomes its own kind of pressure. He did. What does that mean, for the timeline you described? Jinwoo picked up his phone and made a call. One sentence in Korean, too low for her to catch. He set it back down. It means, he said, that what I described to you begins tonight. The call Jinwoo made lasted 11 seconds. Amara counted them without meaning to, the way you count things when the rest of your brain is running too fast to do anything more useful. One sentence. Low. Then he set the phone face down on the desk and looked at her with that particular steadiness she'd stopped trying to read and started simply accounting for. The way you account for weather or terrain, something that exists outside your control but is useful to understand. What did you just do? She said. I told the right people that the timeline has moved. He stood. We need to leave this building. Now. Yes. She picked up her bag without asking why. That was new. 3 days ago she would have asked. Now she was operating on something closer to instinct, and her instinct said that a man like Jinwoo Kong did not say we need to leave in that particular tone unless the reason was something she'd prefer to be moving during. They took a service elevator she hadn't known existed. It opened into a parking structure 2 levels below street. A black car was already waiting, engine running, a man behind the wheel she didn't recognize and didn't ask about. Jinwoo opened the rear door for her. She got in. He got in on the other side, and the car was moving before his door fully closed. Tell me what's happening, she said. Hyun's attorney sent that message at 4:17, Jinwoo said. He was looking at his phone. 15 minutes before that, 2 men I don't employ entered the lobby of your hotel. She felt it hit her solar plexus. They went to my room. The room was empty. You were here. He looked up from the phone. Your laptop was there. She thought about what was on the laptop. Client files, the photography documentation she'd been compiling, the emails between her and Choi, the notes from the So-hyun meeting that she'd typed up because she typed everything up because she'd been a professional for 12 years, and documentation was habit. Can they access it? She said. If they're competent, yes. How competent are they? He looked at her. They work for Hyun. She absorbed that. So he has everything I've been building. He has what was on the laptop. Jinwoo set his phone down, which means he knows about the IT logs. He knows about So-hyun. He knows what you gave to Choi this afternoon. He'll move against So-hyun. He already has. She's been served with an NDA violation notice. Hyun is claiming she disclosed proprietary information. He said it evenly. His attorneys are fast. Amara pressed her thumbnail against her palm. Hard. It grounded her. Where is she? Safe. I had someone with her before you left the attorney's office. I should have arranged that sooner. A pause. I didn't anticipate how fast he'd move. You keep not anticipating him, she said. Not accusatory, just the fact. Jinwoo was quiet for a moment. Yes, he said. I do. The car moved through Sunday evening Seoul, through the lit avenues and the ordinary traffic of a city that was managing its weekend with no knowledge of any of this. Amara watched the streets go past and did the inventory again because it was the only thing she had that was fully hers. The filing, she said. Choi filed this afternoon. That's on record. He can't touch that. And the IT logs. So-hyun's original documentation. She had copies stored outside the office, Jinwoo said. Physical copies. He can serve all the NDA notices he wants. The documents exist. Where are we going? Amara said. A place he doesn't know about, Jinwoo said. I have several. This is the one closest to the attorney district, which is where we're going to need to be in the morning. She looked at him. You had this planned. I had contingencies. He met her eyes. That's different from planned. The car stopped at a building in Mapo that had no signage she could read. An apartment building, 12 floors, not new, not the kind of address that appeared in business profiles. The driver stayed in the car. Jinwoo led her through a lobby, upstairs, not the elevator, to the 4th floor, and unlocked a door at the end of the corridor. The apartment inside was clean, sparse, and had clearly been maintained for exactly this purpose. A desk, a couch, a kitchen with supplies that were recent, a window that looked onto a courtyard rather than the street. No one knows this address under my name, Jinwoo said. The lease is held by a company 4 removals away from anything that connects to me publicly. She stood in the middle of the room and looked at it. Then she put her bag on the desk and turned around. I need you to tell me what tonight looks like, she said. All of it. He told her. Well, it looked like this. Hyun had moved from a defensive posture to an offensive one, which meant he'd made a decision that negotiation was no longer his preferred tool. The attorney message was a public signal, not to Amara's attorney, but to Jinwoo's network, to the people in Seoul who monitored these things, that Hyun Park was willing to escalate past formal channels. The 2 men in the hotel were the private signal. He's testing, Jinwoo said. He was standing at the window, not looking out of it, looking at the floor with the focused inwardness of someone working through a structure. He wants to know whether I'll respond. If I respond too hard, he uses that as evidence that I'm the aggressor. If I don't respond, he takes it as permission to go further. So what do? I make one move, he said. Specific. Visible to the people who matter. Not aggressive enough to justify escalation. Clear enough that he understands the boundary. What move? He looked up. The annual KBI Business Summit is Tuesday, he said. It's the largest gathering of Seoul's corporate leadership outside of government functions. Hyun is presenting. His family is attending. Every board member of every company he needs on his side will be in that room. He paused. I wasn't planning to attend. She understood immediately. You're going to attend. We're going to attend, he said. And you are going to be there as yourself, not as an accessory, not as a symbol. As creative director of Kang Global Holdings, present because you have legitimate professional standing at an event of that caliber. He held her gaze. And if Hyun chooses to make it something else, in front of that room, he will do it in front of every witness that matters to his professional survival. She stood with it. He'll be furious. Yes. And when he's furious, he's not careful. Something in Jinwoo's face confirmed that this was exactly the calculation. That's your move, she said. You're not going to press him. You're going to put him in a room with an audience and let him press himself. He has been building an image in this city for a decade, Jinwoo said. That image requires him to be the wronged party, the disciplined professional whose unstable wife left him for a dangerous man. He paused. If he sees you in that room, composed, credentialed beside me, the image requires him to act, and the action will cost him. And if he doesn't act, then he loses anyway, just more slowly. She sat down on the edge of the couch. The room was very quiet. Somewhere below, a door in the building closed. Footsteps in the corridor, passing, receding. He's going to say something about the photographs again, she said. Let him. In a room full of people, Jinwoo said, who already know that Hyun Park moved a mistress into his home while his wife was undergoing fertility treatment. That information has been circulating since Saturday night. He said it without satisfaction. It was just the landscape. He's not working from the position of strength he believes he has. She looked at him. How did that information circulate? People talk, he said, when the right people are given accurate information in the right settings. Jin Woo, he met her eyes. Did you release that? She said. A pause. I confirmed it, he said, when asked directly by someone who already had the outlines. He didn't look away. I didn't fabricate anything. Everything that was confirmed is documentable fact. She held his gaze. Held it through the part where she was angry, which she was. She was angry at the way he operated in lanes she couldn't fully see, at the way information moved around her and through her, and because of her, without her always knowing. She held it through that, and came out the other side at something that wasn't quite acceptance and wasn't quite approval, but was a functional acknowledgement that she was inside a situation with a specific kind of person and had agreed to be. After Tuesday, she said, whatever this is between us, we talk about what it actually is, not the arrangement, not the strategy. What it actually is. He looked at her for a long moment. Yes, he said. After Tuesday. She lay down on the couch with her coat as a blanket for the second time in 4 nights, and told herself this was temporary, and almost believed it. Monday was logistics and lawyers, and the specific exhaustion of building a legal case while living in a borrowed apartment in Mapo and eating food from convenience bags because there was no time for anything else. Choi had received Hyun's response to the filing, aggressive, detailed, citing the photographs and claiming prior coordination, and had sent back something Amara was not shown in full, but was told was appropriately devastating. So-yeon met them at the attorney's office at noon. She arrived in clothes that weren't hers. She'd left her apartment Sunday evening at Jinwoo's people's suggestion and hadn't been back. She sat across from Amara with the specific composure of someone who has decided that the consequences of where they are preferable to the consequences of going back, and Amara felt a specific gratitude for her that she didn't have the right words for yet. He's going to come after your visa next, So-yeon said. She was talking to Amara directly, past the attorneys. He knows the employment contract with Kang is your visa pathway. If he can argue the contract is circumstantial or invalid, the contract is airtight, Jinwoo said, from the corner of the room, where he'd been standing without being part of the conversation until now. So-yeon looked at him. He has a judge he's used before, she said, on contract disputes. Jinwoo's expression didn't change. So do I, he said quietly, a different one. Choi looked at both of them over the rims of her glasses with the expression of someone who had been practicing law in this city for 19 years and had learned to work with the information available. The summit tomorrow, Choi said. You understand that if Hyun makes statements in that room, we have witnesses. That's the intent, Jinwoo said. And if he doesn't? Then we proceed through the courts, Amara said, which we're doing regardless. Choi nodded slowly. The surveillance documentation, combined with the infidelity timeline, gives us a strong civil case regardless of what happens at the summit. Tuesday accelerates the social component. It does not determine the legal outcome. She looked at Amara. You understand the difference. Yes, Amara said. Tuesday is for him. The courts are for me. Choi set her pen down. Good, she said. Then let's talk about Tuesday. Tuesday morning arrived cold and gray and full of the specific quality of a day that knows it matters. Amara was up at 5:30. She showered and dressed and stood at the window of the Mapo apartment looking at the courtyard below, where nothing was happening except pigeons and early light, and ran through it. She was not afraid. She wanted to examine that because it seemed like the kind of thing she should interrogate, the absence of fear in a situation with genuine risk. She found that it wasn't absence, it was location. The fear was there. It was just behind her instead of in front of her, propelling rather than blocking. She had learned this sometime in the last 4 days, and she didn't know exactly when. Jinwoo appeared from the second room at 6. He looked like he hadn't slept either. She'd noticed that about him. He didn't seem to sleep much, or if he did, it was in short, precise intervals, like everything else he did. He handed her coffee without asking. She took it. How are you? He said. Ready? She said. He looked at her over his own cup. You don't have to perform readiness for me. I'm not performing. She held his gaze. I'm actually ready. I'm furious, and I haven't slept properly in 4 days, and my entire life is in the process of being rebuilt from scratch. But I'm ready for this specific thing. He looked at her for a moment, then, okay. They drove to the summit in the same black car with the same silent driver. Amara wore the suit she'd bought Monday afternoon. Charcoal, sharp-shouldered, the kind of suit that said professional so clearly it became its own kind of armor. She had her ID, her Kang Global Holdings credentials, her business cards that had arrived by courier yesterday morning. Everything was real. Everything was documented. She was here because she had standing to be here, and she had standing because she'd earned it in 4 days, and she had earned it because she'd refused. The KBI Summit was held in a conference center in Songdo that had been designed by someone who believed that architecture could communicate inevitability. Everything was glass and clean lines and the kind of open space that made conversations feel exposed. 300 people, minimum, every significant name in Seoul business. The Park family table was visible from the entrance. She didn't look for it, but she clocked it the way you clock exits because knowing where the threat is located is not paranoia, it's navigation. Jinwoo was known in this room the way weather is known. People didn't approach him immediately. They adjusted. Postures changed. Conversations recalibrated. She watched it happen in real time as they moved through the room and understood for the first time fully what it meant to be beside him in a space like this. It wasn't protection exactly. It was a different kind of visibility. Not Hyun's kind. Not the visibility of being an appendage to someone powerful. The visibility of being beside someone as an equal, recognized as such by the people in the room who understood these things. Several people introduced themselves to her directly. Not through Jinwoo, to her. Her title, her handshake, her answers about the creative strategy she was developing at Kang Global Holdings. She talked about the work. She had been doing the work for 6 days, and she already had things to say about it, real things, and the people she said them to listened. She was in the middle of a conversation with a logistics company director when she felt the shift. The same shift as the gala. The room adjusting to a new weight. She finished her sentence. She thanked the director. She turned. Hyun was 20 feet away. He had seen her. He was already walking toward her with the expression of a man who has been telling himself a specific story all weekend and has finally arrived at the moment the story requires him to act. Jinwoo appeared at her elbow. Not between them. Beside her. The distinction mattered. Hyun stopped in front of them. He was with his father. She hadn't seen the elder Park until now, which meant he'd been approached as backup, which meant Hyun had known she'd be here and had prepared for it and had brought family reinforcement anyway. His father was 70, built like someone who had spent decades deciding things, and he looked at Amara and then at Jinwoo with the expression of a man who was doing a very fast and very cold calculation. Amara, Hyun said. His voice was controlled, too controlled, the kind of controlled that meant the thing underneath was not. Hyun, she said, I'd like to speak with you. I'm at a professional event, she said. If you'd like to communicate, please go through Choi Ye-won's office. His jaw moved. This isn't about the attorneys. Everything between us goes through attorneys now, she said. That's how this works. You're making a mistake. He stepped closer. Not close enough to be a scene, well, close enough to be a pressure. Whatever he's told you, Matas. This isn't about him, she said. Amara, Hyun. Her voice was flat and completely level. I've read the emails you surveilled. I know about the contract strategy. I know about the timeline you built around the open marriage papers. I know about the woman in Mappo, and I know about the supplier in Gangnam 2 years ago. She watched his face go very still. I know everything. And it's all in a filing that is now on record with the courts. The room around them was doing the thing rooms do at moments like this. People not staring, but not moving away either. The conversation-adjacent awareness of something that matters happening nearby. Hyun looked at his father. The elder Park said nothing. You had no right, Hyun said, quietly. The control was slipping. She could hear it under the quiet. You had no right to go through private. You read my emails for 4 months, she said. Don't talk to me about privacy. His face did something she'd never seen it do. Something cracked in it. Not grief? She didn't think it was grief. It was the specific crack of a person who has believed themselves to be the architect of a situation and understood in one moment that they are not. You are still my wife, he said. Low, hard. For approximately another 90 days, she said. And I am telling you, as your soon-to-be former wife, that whatever you do in this room in the next 30 seconds will be witnessed by every person of consequence in your professional life. She saw him look around, saw him actually register the room, the witnesses, the open glass, the 300 people managing their awareness of this. And then his father put a hand on his arm and said something very low in Korean, and Hyun. She watched it happen, watched him make the calculation his father was directing, pulled back, straightened, adjusted his jacket. This isn't over, he said to Jinwoo. No, Jinwoo said. One word, perfectly even. It isn't. Hyun turned. His father steered him away, back toward the Park family table, and Amara watched him go with her heart slamming against her ribs in a way she was certain was visible through the charcoal suit, but probably wasn't. Then it happened. She didn't see it coming. In the reconstruction afterward, she understood that nobody had, not even Jinwoo, which was notable in itself. Hyun had taken 4 steps away when he turned back. He turned back fast, too fast, past his father's hand, past the calculation. And he crossed the distance between them, and he grabbed Amara's arm. Not violently. Hard. His fingers on her forearm through the suit jacket, hard enough that she felt her bones protest. Everything you have, he said, and his voice was low and cracked open and almost unrecognizable. You have because of me. 8 years. Everything. And you throw it away for... Let go of her arm, Jinwoo said. The temperature of the room dropped. Jinwoo had not raised his voice. He had not moved dramatically. He was standing exactly where he'd been standing, and the words had come out at the same volume as everything else he said, but the quality of them was different in a way that landed in Amara's chest like a dropped stone in still water. Every person within earshot had gone completely still. Hyun looked at Jinwoo. Jinwoo looked back. Now, Jinwoo said. Hyun's hand released. The absence of pressure on her arm was almost as physical as the pressure had been. She didn't rub it. She wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of knowing it hurt. It hurt. You will regret this, Hyun said. To Amara, not to Jinwoo. To her. I already have regrets, she said. None of them are about this. His face was terrible to look at, not because she felt sorry for him. She didn't. Not in this moment. In this moment, she felt the clean, cold clarity of someone who is finally on the right side of a door. But because it was the face of a man discovering that the story he's been telling himself about his own life has been wrong, and that nobody is going to correct the story for him because the story is the problem. He left. His father beside him, his posture rigid, not looking back. The room exhaled around them. Conversations resumed. The particular social machinery of a professional event began reabsorbing the moment, the way it always did, folding it back into the ongoing business of the day. Amara turned to Jinwoo. He was looking at her arm, not at her face, at the place where Hyun's hand had been. His jaw was set in a way she hadn't seen before. I'm fine, she said. I know, he said. He still wasn't looking at her face. Jinwoo? He looked up. I'm fine, she said again. It doesn't change anything. He held her gaze for a moment. Then he nodded once, the kind of nod that takes something in and files it, and she understood that what Hyun had just done in front of 300 witnesses had filed itself somewhere in Jinwoo Kang that was not going to be unfiled. They stayed for another 2 hours. Amara had 3 more conversations. She ate something. Jinwoo appeared with a plate at some point and handed it to her without comment, and she took it without comment, and it was becoming clear that this was simply how they operated, this particular wordless negotiation, and she was not sure when that had happened. She spoke to a creative director from a company that had been on her wish list since before Seoul. She handed out business cards. She was present and professional and completely herself in a way she had not been at an industry event in years. When they left, the car was waiting. She got in. The door closed. The city moved past. Somewhere behind them, in the wreckage of the morning's confrontation, Hyun Park was sitting at a table with his father having a conversation she was glad not to be part of. His image was cracked in a room that mattered. His hand had been on her arm in front of witnesses. His attorney was going to receive a call from Choi before the afternoon was out that would add physical intimidation to the existing filings. She knew all of this. She accounted for all of this. She also sat in the car with the full awareness that the morning had not ended, that Hyun's "this isn't over" was not posturing, that Jinwoo's jaw had done that thing and filed it somewhere, and that the filing had a consequence she hadn't been told about yet. "What happens now?" she said. Jinwoo was looking at his phone. He had been looking at his phone since the car started moving, with the focused intensity of someone receiving information. He looked up. "He made a call," Jinwoo said, "in the parking structure 15 minutes ago. One of the intermediaries I mentioned, the ones connected to the other network." She felt the cold come back. "What does that mean?" Jinwoo set his phone down and looked at her directly and said, with the specific weight of someone who does not say things before they are certain, "It means Hyun Park just stopped being a difficult ex-husband and started being something I need to address directly." The car moved through Seoul. The afternoon was going dark at its edges, the early dark of late autumn, and the city lights were coming on across the river, and Amara looked at Jinwoo's face and understood that whatever had been coming had arrived, and that the next hours were going to determine not just the divorce filing or the employment contract or the photographs, but something she didn't yet have a word for. The thing underneath all of it, the version of her life that existed on the other side of this, if they got to the other side. "Tell me what you need from me," she said. He looked at her for a long moment. Outside, Seoul was enormous and indifferent and lit like a circuit board, and inside the car was just the two of them and the specific weight of a decision that was already being made somewhere in this city, whether they were part of it or not. "Stay close," he said. The call came at 7:43 in the evening. Jinwoo took it in the front seat, turned half away from her, and said 4 words in Korean before hanging up. She had enough of the language by now. 8 years of living inside it, absorbing it through walls and dinner parties, and the particular osmosis of a marriage to someone who used it to exclude her. To catch 2 of the 4 words. She caught warehouse, and she caught now. He turned back. "There's been a development," he said. "Tell me." The intermediary Hyun called from the parking structure. He paused in the way she'd learned meant he was deciding how much of the shape to give her. She watched him decide to give her all of it. "He runs a logistics operation in Mapo. Legitimate on the surface, less legitimate underneath. 3 of my people have been tracking his movements since Hyun made the call." He looked at her. "An hour ago, he moved something from a storage facility in Yeongdeungpo to a private address in Mapo. Documents, physical documents, the kind you move when you're about to use them or destroy them." "What kind of documents?" "The kind that connect Hyun to business activities he has spent considerable energy keeping off his formal record." Jinwoo's voice was even. "He has been holding those documents as insurance, against Hyun, against others. Tonight he's decided to liquidate the insurance in exchange for whatever Hyun offered him on that call." She processed this. "He's going to destroy evidence, or hand it to someone who will use it in a way that benefits Hyun's current situation." He looked at her. "Those documents include records of the supplier intimidation 2 years ago, the woman, her daughter's school, everything." The car was stopped at a light. The city moved around them in its ordinary Tuesday evening, indifferent and enormous. "Can you get them?" she said. "We're going to try." "How much risk?" He looked at her with the specific honesty she'd come to understand was simply how he operated when he decided someone deserved the unedited version. "Some," he said. "What do you need me to do?" "Stay here," he said. "In the car. Tae will be with you. If anything changes, he takes you to Choi's office and you stay there until I contact you." She wanted to argue. She felt the argument rise in her chest, the reflexive resistance to being placed somewhere safe while things were decided elsewhere, The resistance she'd spent 8 years suppressing for Hyun and was not going to suppress anymore. But this was different. She knew the difference. This wasn't Hyun managing her out of a room because her presence was inconvenient. This was a person who understood risk, telling her where the risk was and asking her to be somewhere it wasn't. "Okay," she said. He looked at her. Something in his face moved, not surprise exactly, more like the specific quality of being met where you are. He got out of the car. She watched him walk into the evening and disappear around the corner of a building in Mapo that had no significance she could identify. And she sat in the back of the car with Tae in the front and the city lights making everything look like a different kind of world entirely. And she breathed. 1. The next 2 hours were the longest she had spent since the dining room table and the open marriage papers, which felt like it belonged to another decade. Tae sat in the front and did not try to fill the silence, which she was grateful for. She checked her phone. She had 7 messages, 2 from Choi, 1 from Denise, 4 from numbers she didn't recognize that she didn't open. She responded to Choi. "Waiting. We'll update when I have something." She responded to Denise. "Still standing. Talk later." She put the phone in her lap and looked at her hands. The arm where Hyun had grabbed her was bruising. She could feel it under the suit jacket, the specific deep ache of pressure applied to bone. She'd had worse. She'd had a broken wrist twice, as Denise had reminded her, both times managed alone. But this was different because it hadn't been an accident and there had been 300 witnesses, and in 48 hours it was going to be an illegal filing alongside everything else. She thought about the 8 years, not the bad parts. She'd been thinking about those. She made herself think about the early parts, the real ones, the year in Atlanta before Seoul when Hyun had been different, or she'd perceived him as different, which amounted to the same thing at the time. She made herself do this because she thought it was important not to rewrite the whole thing into a villain story. People were not villains from the beginning. They became things. Hyun had become something she couldn't live inside. That was the truth of it. Not simpler, not cleaner. At 9:52, her phone rang. Jinwoo. She answered before the second ring. "We have them," he said. She exhaled one long breath. "Are you safe?" A pause. "Yes." "Your people. Everyone is accounted for." He said it with a weight that suggested it had been close enough to matter. "We're coming back, 20 minutes." She sat in the car and let the 20 minutes pass, and when the black car came around the corner, she was out of her door before it stopped moving, which she would think about later as information about herself. Jinwoo got out. He was fine. She ran her eyes over him quickly, and he was fine. Coat intact, no visible damage, but there was something in his face that was different from when he'd left. Not shaken. Worn. The specific wearing of someone who has done something that cost something even when it went correctly. "Show me," she said. He handed her a folder. She opened it under the car's interior light. The documents were physical, photographed and scanned on someone's phone, clear enough to read. She found the supplier file in 4 pages, found the school complaint, found the paper trail, payments, contacts, 2 names she didn't recognize and one she did, a logistics manager from Hyun's company whose signature appeared on 3 internal memos she had personally filed away in her mental inventory of things that had never added up. She closed the folder. "Choi gets this tonight," she said. "Already sent digitally," Jinwoo said. "Originals go to her in the morning." She looked at him. "And the intermediary?" "He's been given an understanding," Jinwoo said, "about the cost of continuing to work against me, or the people connected to me." He said it simply. No embellishment. She didn't ask for more. They got back in the car. Choi called at 11:15, and Amara had never heard Choi Yuan's voice carry that particular note before. Not excitement, something more contained than that. The satisfaction of a practiced professional watching a case become unambiguous. "The supplier documentation changes the filing substantially," Choi said. "We're no longer looking at a contested divorce with a murky narrative. We're looking at a pattern of coercive conduct, potentially criminal in 2 separate incidents, documented across a timeline that predates your marriage breakdown by 3 years." A pause. "I've also received confirmation from the IT contractor. The email surveillance logs are certified and admissible." "What does that mean for the timeline?" Amara said. "It means Hyun's attorneys have a choice," Choi said. They can fight this in front of a judge who will see everything we've described, or they can advise their client to settle on terms that are favorable to you. Another pause. I expect to hear from them within 48 hours. Amara sat on the couch in the Mapo apartment. Jinwoo was in the kitchen doing something with coffee that she appreciated on principle, even though it was almost midnight. She pressed her free hand flat against her knee the way she did when she needed to stay grounded. The arm, Choi said. The contact at the summit. You need to be documented medically. Tomorrow morning, before anything else. Yes, Amara said. I know. And Ms. Brooks. Choi's voice shifted slightly. Whatever happens in the next 48 hours, the legal outcome is not in doubt. I want you to understand that. What he did and when he did it is on record. The settlement may take time, but the direction is not uncertain. She held the phone for a moment after they hung up and sat with that. The direction is not uncertain. She had not had a sentence like that in a very long time. Jinwoo came from the kitchen with 2 cups and set one beside her without asking and sat in the chair across rather than beside her, giving her the room she hadn't asked for, but he'd correctly identified she needed. Choi says 48 hours, she said. I heard. And Hyun. Will be managed, Jinwoo said. Not by me directly. By the reality of what's now on record. He held his cup. He's a practical man, ultimately. His father is more practical. When the attorney presents them with the documentation and what a trial would expose, they'll settle. She looked at him. You're very certain. I've watched Hyun Park operate for 2 years, he said. I know what he values and in what order. His reputation comes before almost everything. When the choice is between a public trial that exposes the supplier incident and a settlement that costs him money and assets but contains the story, he'll choose the settlement. And if he doesn't? Jinwoo looked at her steadily. Then we go to trial, and the story doesn't stay contained, and every board member who received those photographs on Saturday learns what's actually in the filing. He set his cup down. He won't choose that. She nodded slowly. She was tired in a way that had gotten past the stage of being noticeable and settled into something more like weather, a constant condition of the body she was simply operating within. You said after Tuesday we'd talk, she said, about what this actually is. He looked at her. He didn't deflect. She'd noticed he rarely deflected when she said something directly. Yes, he said. It's after Tuesday. It is. She held her cup with both hands. Tell me what you want, she said. Not the arrangement, not the strategy, what you actually want. He was quiet for a moment. Not evasively. The quietness of someone choosing the right words because the wrong ones would be insufficient. I want to stop being careful around you, he said finally. I have been careful since the first night. Careful about what I tell you, careful about how I say it, careful about what I ask for. He paused. I'm tired of being careful. I want to be direct. Be direct then. I want you to stay, he said. Not in the employment arrangement, not in the apartment Kang Global is covering. I want you to stay because you want to be here. Because this... He paused, and something crossed his face that she hadn't seen before, something that wasn't controlled, or was controlled but barely, means something to me that I didn't budget for when I walked into a hotel bar on Wednesday night with a proposition. She looked at him. I know what it cost you to trust me, he said, knowing what I knew and didn't tell you fast enough. I know what that asked of you on top of everything else, and I'm not asking you to decide anything tonight. He held her gaze. I'm just being direct. Because you asked me to be. She sat with it. Outside the window, the courtyard was dark and still. Somewhere in the city, Hyun Park was in an apartment or a hotel or Jisoo's place in Mapo, probably on the phone with his father, probably in the first stages of understanding that the story he'd built was coming down around him. She didn't feel satisfied about that. She felt mostly just tired, and something quieter than satisfied that she couldn't name yet. I'm not deciding anything tonight, she said. I know. But I'm not leaving either, she said. Tonight. He looked at her. That thing that wasn't quite a smile. Okay, he said. Well, the 48 hours Choi had predicted became 36. Hyun's attorneys called at 2 in the afternoon on Thursday, and by evening, Choi had a preliminary settlement framework that she described in a call that lasted 40 minutes as aggressive in our favor. The apartment in Hanamdong would go to Amara in the divorce settlement. Hyun had chosen it, paid for it, and losing it was the kind of loss that other people noticed, which was why she'd asked for it specifically. Not because she wanted to live there, because it was the apartment with the Han River view that he'd bought to show the world how far he'd come, and she intended to decide herself what happened to it. The joint accounts were to be divided 60-40 in her favor, accounting for the documented non-disclosure of the infidelity timeline. The spousal visa matter was resolved through her employment status, now fully established and independent of Hyun in every legal sense. The supplier incident, the woman, the daughter's school, went into a separate legal matter that was no longer solely Amara's concern. Choi connected her with a prosecutor's office contact on Friday morning, and what happened next was no longer in Hyun's hands to manage. She called Sohyun on Friday afternoon. "Are you somewhere safe?" she said. "Yes." Sohyun sounded tired and also something past tired, the quality of someone who has been running hard and has finally been told they can slow down. "They dropped the NDA suit this morning." "I know, Choi told me." Amara held the phone. "I want you to know that what you did, what you chose, it mattered. The supplier case is moving forward because of what you gave us." A silence on the other end. "She deserved that," Sohyun said. "The supplier. What happened to her daughter?" A breath. "Nobody did anything then." "Someone is now." Another silence. "Is it over?" Sohyun said. "For you." Amara looked out the window of the Mapo apartment. The courtyard in daylight looked different, ordinary, almost gentle, the kind of small urban green space that existed everywhere in this city and that she'd never particularly noticed before. "The legal part is ending," she said. "The rest of it takes longer." "Yeah," Sohyun said. "It usually does." Oh. She moved into the Mapo apartment officially on Saturday. Not because Jinwoo asked her to, he didn't ask. She made the decision and told him, and he transferred the lease to her name without ceremony or commentary. She had looked at 3 other apartments during the week and found reasons to discount each of them that she was honest enough with herself to understand were not entirely about the apartments. Denise called that afternoon while Amara was arranging the desk, her desk, with her laptop, in an apartment with her name on the lease. "Tell me everything," Denise said. It was the same sentence she'd used 10 days ago when this had all started, but it landed differently now. Amara told her everything. Start to finish, the part she'd been managing in fragments across 10 days of phone calls. Denise was quiet for most of it, which was still unusual, but less unprecedented than it had been on the night of the dining room table. "So the divorce is settling?" Denise said when she'd finished. "Yes." "And the job is real?" "Yes. I have a presentation to the full board on Monday. I've been working on it since Wednesday." "And the man?" Amara paused. "Complicated." "But you're in his apartment." "It's my apartment. He transferred the lease." "Amara." Denise's voice was gentle and exact, the way it got when she was going to say something true. "You moved into his safe house." "I know." "Do you like him?" She looked at the wall of the apartment, which was plain and needed something on it. She was already thinking about what. "Yes," she said. "Does he deserve you?" She thought about it honestly, not defensively, not optimistically. Honestly. She thought about the hotel bar and what he'd known and what he'd told her and in what order. She thought about the contract and the IT logs and the moment at the summit when he'd said let go of her arm in that specific quiet. She thought about soup delivered to a hotel room by someone who'd noticed she hadn't eaten. "He's trying to," she said. Denise was quiet for a moment. "Okay," she said. "That's something." "It's not everything." "No," Denise said. "But it's something. And something is where you start." She saw Hyun one more time before the divorce was finalized. It was unplanned, the truest version of unplanned, the kind that no amount of strategy on anyone's part could have anticipated, because it happened in a supermarket in Itaewon on a Wednesday morning 6 weeks after the summit. She was in the produce section. He was by the refrigerated cases. They saw each other at the same moment. He looked worse than the last time, not externally. Hyun Park would never let himself look worse externally if he had any choice in it. But there was something in his posture that had been removed. The specific quality of a man who believes his position is unassailable had left him, and what was underneath it was just a person, tired, smaller than the idea of him. She didn't move toward him. She didn't move away. She stood where she was. He crossed to her. He stopped a careful distance away. The distance of someone who had been told explicitly, by attorneys and by events, what proximity cost him. "I hear the settlement is proceeding," he said. "It is." He looked at the produce in her basket. An ordinary look, the kind that didn't mean anything. "Are you—" He stopped. "Are you well?" She looked at him. The man who had brought her coffee exactly right in the first year and forgotten how she took it by the third. The man who had sat across from his mother and let her say things about fertility and deficiency without saying a word. The man who had grabbed her arm in front of 300 people because the story he'd told himself had finally run out of room to live in. "Yes," she said, "I am." He nodded. He looked like he wanted to say more. She waited because she was not afraid of what he might say anymore, and waiting cost her nothing. "I didn't—" he started. Stopped. His jaw moved. "I didn't mean for it to become what it became." She thought about that. About whether it was true. And in what way it was true. And what it meant that it might be true alongside all the other things that were also true. "I know," she said finally. "That's the part that took me the longest to understand. You didn't plan most of it. You just kept choosing the version of things that was easier for you, one choice at a time, until it added up to everything it added up to." She held his gaze. "That doesn't make it smaller, but I understand it." He looked at her for a moment with something in his face she didn't have a name for. "Kang," he said. Not a question, not an accusation, just the name. "That's mine to navigate," she said. He nodded. One more look. At her face, briefly, like he was memorizing something or releasing something. She couldn't tell which. Then he moved away toward the refrigerated cases, and she turned back to the produce, and that was the last conversation they had that wasn't managed by attorneys. The board presentation on Monday went long because they had questions, and the questions were good ones, and she answered them directly and without performance. And at the end of it, the head of the board said, "We've needed someone who thinks like this for some time," in the tone of someone who meant it rather than someone who was being polite. She drove back to the Mapo apartment after, and stood in the kitchen and made herself actual food for the first time in weeks. Not convenience food, not hotel room service, not crackers from a minibar. She made the jollof rice her mother had taught her, the real version that took time and attention and didn't forgive impatience, and she stood at the stove and stirred it and let the smell fill the apartment that was hers. Jinwoo came at 7. She told him she was cooking, which was the most domestic sentence she'd said to another person in recent memory, and he had said, "I'll come at 7," with the simplicity of someone who didn't complicate things that didn't require complication. He stood in the kitchen doorway and looked at what she was making and didn't say anything immediately, and she found she didn't need him to. "Sit down," she said. He sat at the small table. She brought food. She sat across from him. The apartment was warm and smelled like something real, and outside the window the courtyard was doing whatever courtyards did in the evening, which was mostly nothing, and she found that nothing had a quality she'd forgotten about. It could be okay. Nothing could be okay. They ate and talked about things that were not Hyun and not the settlement and not strategy. He told her something about himself she hadn't known, that he'd grown up in Incheon, that his mother had run a small dry cleaning shop, that the first time he'd walked into a room of the kind of people he now navigated daily, he had been 22 and had understood in the first 10 minutes both that he didn't belong and that he intended to anyway. She told him about Atlanta, about Denise and her parents and the first job out of design school and the particular freedom of being good at something and knowing it before anyone else confirmed it. She told him about meeting Hyun at a conference, about the year before Seoul that she'd spent convincing herself the move was what she wanted because he wanted it, and the wanting had become indistinguishable. "Did you know," he said, "before you left Atlanta, that it was wrong?" She thought about it. "I knew something," she said. I didn't have the language for what. I thought it was fear. Normal fear about a big change. She turned her fork over. It wasn't fear. What was it? The part of me that knew I was organizing my life around his, she said, and telling myself that was love. He was quiet for a moment. There's a difference, he said. Yes, she said. I know that now. He looked at her. The particular attention she'd stopped trying to analyze and started simply accepting as his natural mode of being present. I want to ask you something, he said. Ask? What you want. He said it carefully. Not from the situation, not from the settlement or the job or what's next legally. What you want for yourself, for your life. He paused. When you're not managing a crisis. She set her fork down and sat back and looked at the wall where she'd started putting things. A print she'd bought at a market in Hongdae, a small shelf with 3 books, and a plant that she was cautiously optimistic about. She looked at the ordinary evidence of a life she was building with her own choices, one object at a time. I want to do work that's mine, she said. Actually mine, with my name on it in a way that isn't borrowed from someone else's platform. She paused. I want to be somewhere that I chose, not somewhere I arrived because someone else's life brought me here. Another pause, longer, and I want... She stopped. Say it, he said quietly. I want to figure out what this is, she said, what we are, without the crisis underneath it, without strategy, just what it actually is when everything else is quiet. She met his eyes. I don't know if it survives that. I don't know if what we are in the middle of all of this is what we'd be without it. There's one way to find out, he said. I know. Are you willing to find out? She looked at him across the small table in the warm kitchen of the apartment in Mapo with the jollof rice going cold between them and the courtyard doing nothing outside the window and her own choices hanging on the wall. And she thought, this is the most honest question anyone has asked me in 10 years. Not are you willing to accept the arrangement, not are you willing to sign the papers, not are you willing to perform a version of yourself that serves someone else's needs. Are you willing to find out what something real looks like when the noise stops? Yes, she said. He held her gaze. That thing that lived near a smile. Okay, he said. The divorce was finalized on a Tuesday in December, 11 weeks after the hotel bar, and the proposition and the crimson dress and the summit and all the things in between. Choi called at 10 in the morning and said the word finalized in the tone of someone who had seen this process from beginning to end enough times to know that the word landed differently for different people. For Amara, it landed quietly. She was at her desk in her office at Kang Global Holdings when the call came, her office, with her name on the door in the kind of modest lettering that didn't need to announce itself, and she held the phone after Choi hung up and sat with it for a moment. She was not the same person who had stood at a Han River window telling herself the view was enough. She was not a better version of that person, not a fixed version, not a version that had arrived somewhere complete. She was simply a different one, someone who had been through something and had come out the other side still standing, with bruises she could locate and scar tissue she was still mapping, and a life that had her name on it in ways that would have been unrecognizable to the woman who packed an overnight bag in 11 minutes because her marriage was handing her papers across a marble table. She put the phone down and opened her laptop and went back to work. At lunch, Jinwoo came to her office. He didn't knock. They had moved past knocking in the way that people move past small formalities when they have been through enough together that the formalities become friction. He sat in the chair across from her desk and looked at her. Choi called me also, he said. I know. He was quiet for a moment. How do you feel? She thought about the honest answer. Relieved, she said, and tired. And she stopped and looked at him. Like I can start now. Like before today, I was managing an ending, and now I can actually start. He held her gaze. Yes, he said. That's what it is. She leaned back in her chair. I want to go somewhere, she said. This weekend. Not Seoul. Somewhere I've never been because Hyun didn't have business there. Where? I don't know. That's the point. She looked at him. Will you come? He looked at her with the full attention she had finally stopped cataloging and simply received. Yes, he said. She turned back to her laptop. Good. I'll figure out where. She looked at the screen. Now go away. I have a proposal to finish. He almost smiled. She heard it in the small sound he made getting up from the chair, something that was not quite a laugh but was adjacent to one, and she tucked it away in the inventory she was beginning to keep. Not of risks and timelines and legal filings, but of small, real things, the currency of a life that belonged to her. The Hanam-dong apartment, the one with the Han River view, the one Hyun had chosen for what it communicated, she donated to a transitional housing organization in January. Not sold, donated. The director of the organization called to thank her, and she said, use it well and meant it, and hung up without needing anything more from the exchange. She heard through the professional circuit, not through any direct contact, that Hyun Park had relocated to Singapore by March. His father's company was restructuring. The Park family name was still in the business press, but in smaller font than before and with a different quality of attention, the attention that accrues to people who have been found to be somewhat less than they presented. She didn't follow the coverage closely. She had her own work to follow. Under her creative direction, Kang Global Holdings launched a rebrand in February that received coverage in 4 industry publications and a commendation from a design association she'd spent her career admiring from a distance. The work was hers in the way she'd asked for. Her creative decisions, her team, her name attached to the outcome in a way that didn't require anyone else's context to be understood. She hired 2 people herself. One of them was a junior designer from Busan, whose portfolio reminded her of her own at 24. Ambitious in the specific way of someone who hasn't yet learned to be afraid. The other was So-hyun, who had a background in communications and a demonstrated willingness to choose correctly when the correct choice was costly. So-hyun sat across from her in the interview and said, I need to know that this job is mine because I'm qualified. You're qualified, Amara said. The other thing is why I knew you were qualified before we sat down. So-hyun looked at her for a moment. Then she nodded once, the way people nod when something is settled. When do I start? She said. Monday, Amara said. On a Saturday in late February, Amara stood on a ferry crossing to Jeju Island with the sea wind coming at her from the west and the mainland disappearing behind them into a gray and ordinary horizon. Jinwoo was beside her at the rail, not touching, just there, in the particular close proximity that had become their natural distance from each other. The space that was neither careful nor careless, but simply where they were. She'd picked Jeju because she'd never been. 8 years in Korea, and she'd never been because Hyun didn't go to places that didn't have a professional event attached, and she'd organized her travel around his reasons. For so long she'd stopped generating her own. She had her own reason now. She wanted to see it. The wind was cold, and her jacket was doing its job, and the sea was the color of something she didn't have a word for, a specific gray-green that didn't appear in any palette she'd worked with, and that she was going to spend the weekend trying to figure out how to name. You're thinking about color, Jinwoo said. She looked at him. How did you know? Your eyes change when you're thinking about work. He looked at the water. They focus differently. She looked at the horizon. Is that annoying? No, he said. It was not the answer of someone performing tolerance. It was simply no. She looked at him from the side, the jaw, the eyes that were directed at the water now, the particular settled quality of a person who had made peace with the weight they carried rather than pretending it wasn't there. She had learned a great deal about him in the weeks between the apartment and this ferry, in the space where crisis had been and ordinary life was taking its place. She had learned that he woke early and was quiet in the mornings and didn't require conversation until he'd had coffee, which suited her. She had learned that he kept very few things but kept them deliberately, and that the few objects in his apartment had history to them that he didn't volunteer but would tell if asked. She had learned that he was careful with her, not the earlier careful, the strategic careful of a man managing a situation, but a different kind, the careful of someone who had decided that a particular thing was worth protecting and was going about it without announcement. She had also learned, gradually, and without a specific moment she could point to, that she trusted him. Not completely. She wasn't sure she would trust anyone completely again in the way she'd trusted before she'd learned what trust without information cost, but genuinely, in the way that counted. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Yes." The night in the hotel bar, she kept her eyes on the water. "If I'd said no, if I'd heard the proposition and walked away, what would you have done?" He was quiet for a moment, not the calculating quiet. She knew the difference now. The honest quiet. "Found another approach," he said. "Found something slower. Something that didn't ask anything of you." He paused. "What I wanted to do about Hyun wasn't contingent on you. What I wanted—" He stopped. "Say it," she said. She'd used his own words back to him, and she felt him register it. "What I wanted that had anything to do with you," he said, "was contingent on you, on whether you chose it." He looked at the water. "I would have found a way to be useful to you from a distance. Made sure the information about the visa reached the right attorney. Made sure you had options you might not have found on your own." He paused. "And hoped that somewhere in the process you might choose to let me be something other than useful." She held that for a long moment. The ferry moved through the water. Somewhere behind them, Seoul was going about its Saturday, indifferent and enormous, and no longer the city she'd spent 8 years surviving. "That's the most honest thing you've said to me," she said. "I'm trying to be less careful," he said. "It's a work in progress." She almost laughed. She was finding she almost laughed around him with a frequency that surprised her, not because he performed humor, but because something about the particular gap between his control and his honesty was genuinely funny in ways she hadn't expected. She turned to face him. He turned at the same moment, which meant they were closer than they'd been at the rail, closer than the ordinary proximity, close enough that the wind didn't fit between them. "I don't need you to be useful," she said. "I know," he said, "and I don't need you to be careful." "I know that too," he said, quietly. She looked at him. The sea wind was doing something to her hair that she was not managing and had decided not to manage. The water was that specific gray-green she still didn't have a name for. Behind them, the mainland was almost gone. "I'm telling you," she said, "in case the information is useful." Something crossed his face that she recognized now. The thing that lived near a smile, the thing she'd been cataloging for weeks, the involuntary evidence of a person who has been found where they actually are. He reached up and touched her face. Not urgently, the way he did everything, deliberately, without apology. His hand was warm against her jaw and the wind was cold, and she held very still for exactly 1 moment. And then she didn't, because holding still was a thing you did when you weren't sure, and she was sure. When they separated, the mainland was gone entirely, and the sea was in every direction, and the sky was doing something complicated with the light that she was going to be thinking about for days. And she turned back to the rail with his shoulder against hers and looked at it. "Gray-green," she said. "What?" "The water." She looked at it. "I've been trying to name the color, but it's not one thing. It's the light going through it and the depth underneath and what's reflecting." She paused. "You can't name it from a distance. You have to be in it." He looked at the water, then at her. "Yes," he said. "That's true of most things." She leaned into the rail and watched the island appear on the horizon, a dark shape resolving slowly into something she could recognize, and the wind did what wind does and the sea did what seas do, and behind them everything that had been was behind them, and ahead of them was simply what came next, unnamed and unhurried and entirely theirs to find out.